Hey, welcome back to another episode of Family Matters with Instructor Mike. I am your host, Instructor Mike, and this is where parenting, psychology, and real world development merge into one honest conversation. Today, we're talking about something I call the CFCC Model, a framework that helps us understand the four roles fathers often find themselves in when life, law, and love collide. Now, this is not about judgment, it's about access. This is when access defines fatherhood, right? This is about when we talk about fatherhood in America, and especially for Black men, maybe white men, or maybe other men, but we have to be honest, right? You can't play the role you are not allowed to play. So let's dive into it. What are the contents of this particular episode? We're going to look at the four levels, understanding the C, the CF, the CFCC, and the CFCC roles in modern fatherhood. Some of y'all like, that's a lot of C's. Well, it's going to make sense a little bit later. Two, we're going to talk about the psychological science, research on attachment, consistency, and child development outcomes. Three, we're going to look at the empirical evidence, statistics on custody, gatekeeping, and systemic challenges that fathers actually face. And then four, what are some strategic takeaways? Let's get practical and let's look at the guidance for fathers in navigating these different access levels. Let's go ahead and dive into it. So, the foundation principle, access, defines the role. Now, this model, again, is not about judgment. It's about access. No matter how much you want to be there, you cannot play the role you are not allowed to play. Every father exists along four access based levels shaped by the individual circumstances that exist in that role between the mother, the father, the other co parent, whatever your nomenclature, your title is. It's not just intent, it's the circumstances. The systemic reality. When life, law, and love collide, fathers must navigate structural barriers that redefine their roles. You can have the heart to co parent, as we talked about before. Your heart can really be in it. Your skills may be in it. But if you are blocked by the access and who allows that block to be possible, it redefines the role. So, without further delay, let's go ahead and dive into the four levels of fatherhood. Now, every father exists somewhere along four access based levels. The C is the creator. You know what that is. You fathered a child, but that typically is where it stopped, right? All of us are along the C because we create the life, right? The CF is the creator and the financier. You provide financially, maybe by choice, maybe by court order, but you may have little to no say in parenting decisions. Then you've got the CFC, right? So we don't abandon the C or the F, right? It just adds on top of it the CFC. That is the creator, the financier, and the consultant. What makes you the creator? Well, you know what that is. You created the life. What makes you the financier could be by choice, maybe by court order. You are paying for your child because that's a responsibility that we have, the assumption of responsibility. You create that life, you're financially responsible for that life, right? But then the consultant, let's just say you actually do or have studies in family and consumer sciences, family law, early childhood education, human growth and development. You qualify to be a teacher, you qualify to be a consultant. But the dynamics between the mother and the father or the other co parent or caregiver, you may not always be able to be physically present, right? Either because of work or because your access has been denied, because the parent, the other parent, may have only wanted children. They may not have wanted you. And this is not a thing to shame or judge them on, right? This is a psychological phenomena. When men, women, family, and friends have walked away looking at abandonment issues that the other co parent may not have asked for, but endured in their childhood with their adverse childhood experiences or even adverse adult experiences, right? You may not be able to be there, right? They may do everything they can to block your access. So, what happens? You can influence from a distance. You all may have beautiful phone conversations, Facebook conversations, FaceTime conversations. You may be able to communicate wonderfully from a distance, right? So, you advise, you protect, you plan, and you show up strategically. That's the creator, the financier, and the consultant. And then there's the CFCC model. That's the creator, the financier, the consultant, and co parent. That's the full partnership when both parents, mother, father, both caregivers, whomever, can separate the romantic story and skills from the parenting one. If you follow me before, you know that I say that marriage and parenting are both professions. Marriage and parenting are both vocations. Marriage and parenting require skills, and some of the skills intermix, if you will, but some of the skills are different. Some of the loves are different, right? And if you are able to separate that, not just by feeling, but by actual skill, and you are able to raise the child with maturity, mutual respect, knowledge, skill, ability, competence, confidence, and the capacity to understand that these roles are separate, right? These roles are separate and they require skills. Okay. Now, each of these roles are shaped by access, or each is shaped by access, not just intent. Again, a man can have the heart to co parent, but if the system or the mother or the circumstances block him, his role is defined by survival, not desire. So let's go ahead and look at the science of consistency, right? Let's add some developmental science here. Children thrive on consistency. Attachment research from John Bowlby to contemporary studies in developmental psychology shows that what matters most isn't a perfect home, it's a predictable one. And what did I say before? These problems are not special, they're predictable. Marriage and parenting problems, the etymology of the word problem, right? The history of it. The word problem means a thing that is presented before one for consideration, right? These are predictable problems. And when a father is allowed consistent access, children develop stronger emotional regulation, right? Better school performance and higher self esteem. Of course, when the father is qualified to be a father, not just presence alone is not enough. It's not enough. But when that access is inconsistent, when visits are weaponized or emotionally chaotic, the child's nervous system experiences instability. In other words, it's safer for a child to have a father who is consistently present at a distance than one who appears and disappears depending on conflict. So you're not wrong for, creating that distance, moms. If you're listening to this, if he is not qualified and you were not qualified respectfully to assess his ability to be a father. And it's not your fault. It's what you were taught. Let's say our affirmations. It's not my fault. It's what I was taught. It's not my fault. It's what I was taught. Last time. It's not my fault. It's what I was taught. Right. And that's where the CFC role, the consultant father, becomes a developmentally protective strategy, because it's safer to have someone who's present at a distance than one who appears and disappears, right? Let's continue. Here we go. So let's look at some custody trends, right? The sole mother custody has been declining. If you look at the 1980s, the percentage was high. The 1990s, we're looking at probably a little above 60%, around 2000, under 60%, probably around maybe 53, 54-ish. And around 2010, it's about maybe 42 or 43%. And it is declining. There's a court bias reality. Now, courts still favor mothers as a starting point, right? Fathers always have to fight an uphill battle for equal access. That's a thing. That's very much a thing. Let's ground this in facts. Let's look at some maternal gatekeeping, right? The idea that some mothers consciously or unconsciously control or limit a father's involvement is well documented in family research. Allen and Hawkins, 1999, they wrote about this in the Journal of Marriage and Family, showing how beliefs and behaviors can either invite or block fathers from participating. We just talked about the custody trends. According to demography, right, in 2014, sole mother custody has dropped from about 80% in the 1980s to about 42%. But the courts, again, they still favor the mothers as the starting point. Remember these words: best interest of the child. Best interest of the child. That is the legal standard. What is in the best interest of the child? And gentlemen, fathers, I encourage you to pause, take a deep breath, exhale. Ask yourself the following questions. Have I been trained in family and consumer sciences or home economics in the areas of cooking, child development, health and hygiene, home management and design, education and community awareness, sewing, textiles, clothing management, budgeting and economics, home defense, life defense, fire? It's just a bunch of topics. Have I been trained specifically in those areas to where I know that I have common sense in those areas, not common knowledge. Common sense is good sense and sound judgment in practical matters. Practical is defined as of or concerning with the actual doing of things rather than just theories or ideas. So I know I'm qualified to do because I have been taught how to do. I have curricula, I have notes, I have videos, I have studies, I have things. I am a researcher. If I were a teacher, I can not only say it, I could show it, right? Education must be rigorous. Education must be relevant. No significant learning occurs where there isn't a significant relationship. Dr. James Comer, right? Benjamin Franklin, Confucius also said, tell me, I won't remember. Teach me, I will remember. Involve me, I will learn. Can I not only just tell, can I teach? Can I involve the child? Do I understand what developmentally appropriate practices are? Do I understand the domains of child development? Physical, cognitive, language, and even the additionals, social, emotional, adaptive. Do I understand the Reggio Emilia, the Montessori philosophy? If I were to cite some names, Lev Vygotsky, Yuri Bronfenbrenner, Eric Erickson, right? Maria Montessori, Laurice Malaguzzi, right? If I were to recite those names, or quote those names or cite those names, do I even know their theories? Albert Bandura, Mary Ainsworth, John Bowlby, John Dewey, right? Friedrich Froebels. Do I know who those people even are and what relevance it is to children, right? Do I know about attachment theories? Is it just for children? Is it also for the parent? If you don't understand these things, no shame, no judgment, but you may not be qualified, right? Let's look at the false allegation risk. All right, here we go. In 2005, they found that during custody disputes, I think it's Trosame and Bala, they found that during custody disputes, it is definitely the case, more likely than not, that intentional false abuse allegations were several times more common than in the general population. What does that mean? That means during these custody disputes, right, men face a unique danger, not just of rejection, but of reputational and legal annihilation. Just the allegation alone, right, can cause the court to rule in favor of the mom in the, what's that thing I said again? Best interest of the child, right? Here we go. We got to be honest about these things, right? If you look at the 42% maternal gatekeeping, Title 4D, federal enforcement of child support, 80% historical disparity, and 3 times the false allegation rate, right? These are things we were just talking about. Allens and Hawkins shows how beliefs and behaviors can block father precipitation. Conscious and unconscious control of father involvement. It's well documented in family research, literature studies, creates barriers regardless of your intentions. Let's look at Title 4D of the Social Security Act. Did you know Title 4D of the Social Security Act incentivizes, that's the federal law that incentivizes states to treat fathers as financial units first, parents second. States are paid by the federal government to enforce child support collection. Did you know that? The system is designed to reduce fathers to paychecks. There's a legal framework that prioritizes financial rights over parental rights. Mhm. So when men say that they're staying away to stay alive, they're being strategic, not cowardly. They're refusing to risk life and freedom and reputation. They're recognizing a rigged system, and it requires different strategies. The protection allows for future involvement opportunities, right? Now, what does the game say when it comes down to self-defense? People get out of cases, they don't get out of caskets, right? So what does that mean? That I am willing to do what I have to do to defend myself to get out of this case, perhaps, because in the casket is the terminal thing. So using that, and this is analogous to this, saying that I am willing to take on the label of deadbeat, because you can always reverse that label later on. I'm not talking about the financial deadbeat. I'm talking about the social construct of deadbeat. the cultural constructive deadbeat, maybe the family constructive deadbeat. And we're going to talk about that in another episode, right? Because I can always rekindle that relationship, but not when you're in a jail cell, not when you've got a false allegation, when the allegation alone is enough to destroy you. And even if you win, even if the court finds that the allegation is not true, look at how many people already believe it. Oh, that's an uphill battle. That's an uphill battle. So let's look at the psychology of the roles, right? Let's look at what each level does to the father psychologically. The C, the creator, right? They may experience guilt and grief, but sometimes this distance protects him from destruction. So it's not about abandonment. It's a survival strategy that preserves future opportunities for involvement when the conditions change. Let's look at the CF, creator financier struggle, right? It feels like they're reduced to a paycheck with an identity conflict. It's like I'm paying, but I am still called a deadbeat. Well, that isn't failure. It's a structural design that limits the role to financial contribution, right? Let's look at the CFC balance. You kind of live in the gray area. You're like part coach, part ghost. Stays involved through planning, teaching, mentoring from afar. Maybe you have a phone relationship with the parent, right? But you don't see your children, but you're still an influence. It requires discipline and emotional restraint to maintain boundaries. If you've been following me, you already know what do I talk about emotions under Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett's The Theory of Constructed Emotion, that emotions are what? You are not born with them, right? You are born with senses. You are taught what to feel. You are taught what to be offended by. So you're able to have emotional restraint when you're able to say, well, this is not anything to be sad about. These are just the conditions that I am in, right? And then the co parent, right? The healthiest outcome is when you have co parent the co-parent role, the CFCC role. That's the healthiest outcome when both adults are emotionally safe. Here, the children see modeling of cooperation, boundaries, and teamwork, the foundation of social learning. Each level shapes a child's developmental environment. Inconsistent access, not love, is what destabilizes children. That's why knowing your role is essential. It lets you act intentionally, not emotionally, out of reactions or let's go ahead and look at the reproductive reality and the unintended fatherhood. So let's address something that's uncomfortable. Sometimes conception was not a plan, it was a night. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? A one night stand when protection fails or isn't used, and the mother chooses to continue the pregnancy. The father legally has no say. You have no say. That asymmetry creates a unique conflict. She holds reproductive agency. When she says, I'm going to keep it, unless something medical happens, that's it. She's going to keep it. And he inherits a lifelong responsibility. So let's look at some studies. According to Joyner, Guzzo, and Hayford in 2013, 2014, it shows that unintended fatherhood is directly linked to reduced involvement and higher conflict, right? That doesn't mean that these men don't care. It means that they never had the psychological transition to fatherhood and into fatherhood. Think about what they got when they were younger. Does the community, the culture that you are in, what does it teach its boys at the early level? What do most families teach their boys at the early level for their future? Because your children are not just your children, they are future adults, and the seeds that you plant in them early will greatly affect what they are likely to perform and transform when they become adults. They didn't consent to the timing, and the timing affects identity transformation in low income context. Eden and Kafalas, 2005. Oh, we definitely have to have that discussion. There is a book called Promises I Can Keep. Oh, this is so big. We are going to have that conversation. I really hope that you are liking and subscribing to this. We're going to have that conversation. I watched this video. We're going to do a reaction to that. Eden Gonzalez found that some women view motherhood as a path to meaning and stability, sometimes even economic survival through welfare or child support. It is complex. It's not evil. It's not simple, but structural. And if a man recognizes that dynamic early, sometimes the wisest thing he can do is redefine his role realistically, not romantically. Oh, we got to dive into that. And this is not to shame or to criticize or even to judge, but this is for knowledge so that you can understand that, yes, it is very much the case that there are some women who only want the children and they do not know a lot about the adoption option. And that may cost more money than they can afford to even have, right? They don't want maybe the abortion, right? There could be a variety of different things. So if men, women, family, and friends have walked away, having a child appears to be extremely easy because all it takes is the insertion of a genital into another genital, a little friction depending upon your timing. And once that seed is in and mom is in and the woman is in ovulation or whatever the case may be, that's all it is biological proximity and that's it. And physics and friction, you know it. Okay. So let's go on ahead and look at it. Let's look at some strategic takeaways for fathers. So, what can fathers do with this model? One, know your current level. You can't operate as a co parent if your environment only allows you to be a consultant. Access or assess your actual access, not your desired access to operate effectively within realistic boundaries. Two, protect your peace and your freedom. Freedom is the foundation of future fatherhood. You can rebuild a reputation. You cannot rebuild a prison record or a grave. Strategic withdrawal preserves options for future involvement. Three, document everything consistently, every payment, every message, every attempt to connect. It is not paranoia, it is protection. Create a paper trail that demonstrates consistent effort and financial responsibility. Here we go. Let's look at number four, right? Consistency. Okay. And getting practical. Consistency. You got to focus on consistency. Even from a distance, be predictable. Be predictable. Send the same message every week. Keep your tone steady. Children feel patterns more than promises, right? Maintain that predictable communication schedule that a child can depend on. And then number five, this is extremely important. Stay in continuous training. I argue you need to take early childhood education, professional development classes, take that parenting class, take the anger and emotional management class, take all kinds of home economics training that you can get. You never know when it's going to be time for you to be tapped in, coach. You never know what can happen. The CFCC model assumes that movement and evolution in fatherhood roles, it can happen. It can happen. You just never know. You always want to be prepared. Read parenting and child development research regularly. Develop emotional regulation and communication skills continuously. Prepare for that role evolution. Circumstances and maturity can change. She may not like you now when the kid is 2, but when the child is 12, it might be time for you to tap in, right? That's if you really care. And if you don't, that's fine. I just want to help you grow and evolve because who you were at the time you created that child, you can be somebody totally different. You can have the skills if you want the skills, right? In fatherhood, access shapes identity. Access shapes identity, but wisdom shapes legacy. And the CFCC model doesn't glorify absence, it names reality. It is not about shame, it's about structure because every man who becomes a father deserves the truth about the terrain that he is walking into. And how many of y'all listening to this and you're like, I wish I would have got this stuff earlier? Well, you're getting it now. And for the fathers listening, your value isn't determined by a court docket or a social label. You may be a creator, a financier, a consultant, or a co parent. But if you are intentional, disciplined, and self aware, you are still qualified. So, what are your questions? I welcome your questions and the discussion about the CFCC model framework. What are your thoughts about it? Sound off in the comments. You really matter. If you found this helpful, share it with a brother, a friend, or a father who needs to hear the science behind his struggle. Because remember, in fatherhood, access shapes identity, but wisdom shapes legacy. This is Instructor Mike. You've been trained. I'll see you on the next episode. You can visit me at www.instructormike.com. If you have any other questions, email me at mike@instructormike.com.